بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي الأولين والآخرين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Firstly, did you all get the memo about the exam? Now, was the message sent? So you all brought the exam with you? No? No? People are looking down, smiling. Some of you brought the exam?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah? خلاص إن شاء الله. Sorry? However, what we'll do is we'll continue firstly some of Al-Usool Ath-Thalaatha, so we don't miss a complete lesson, and then we'll do the exam at the end, inshallah. So, in last week's lesson, where did we get to? Who was taking notes?
We finished in titles and introduction.
Okay, so we're on فَإِذَا قِيلَ لَكَ مَنْ رَبُّكَ فَقُلْ رَبِّي اللَّهُ. Okay. Yalla, we'll quickly revise before that, inshallah. So, Al-Usool Ath-Thalaatha, what's the actual name of this risala? What's the actual name of the Ahmed? Now, وَأَدِلَّتُهَا ثَلَاثَةُ الْأُصُولِ وَأَدِلَّتُهَا. And this risala, ثَلَاثَةُ الْأُصُولِ وَأَدِلَّتُهَا, authored by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, is divided into certain sections. طيب. There are 3 muqaddimat, there are 3 introductions, and then there is the risala itself, meaning the 3 questions, the 3 principles, and then there is a khatima. The muqaddimat, I don't think we mentioned this last week. The muqaddimat, meaning from اعلم رحمك الله أنه يجب على كل مسلم تعلم 4 مسائل, all the way to where we stopped. Some of the ulama mention that that is not a part of Usool Ath-Thalaatha. Rather, the students of Imam Muhammad ibn Wahhab rahimahullah, they collected some of those fawaid from his rasail and they added them as an introduction to Thalathat al-Usool. And that's why some of the mashayikh who have previously taught Thalathat al-Usool, they will begin from Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قال المؤلف رحمه الله فإذا قيل لك من ربك فقل ربي الله. They begin, because that is the beginning of the risala. And as for the muqaddimat, then that was introduced by some of the students of the Shaykh Muhammad rahimahullah from his various writings and put together in order for it to be sent and taught and in order for it to be beneficial for the people. But that is what is known and has become widespread. طيب. In the first muqaddimah, what's the summary of the first muqaddimah? What's the summary of the first introduction? We said before the risala are 3 introductions, 3 muqaddimah. What's the summary of the first muqaddimah? Who knows?
It's obligatory for us to learn 4 matters. Number 1 is knowledge.
Do you not have the workbook with you?
I have it, but the first lesson I took notes on.
We've got the workbook.
Yeah,
No,
I've got it.
thank you.
So the first one is I have knowledge, so knowing Allah and knowing His Prophet. And he said this is what the main principle that the rest of the book will be based on.
No.
Then the second part is to implement it through righteous actions. The third is to do dawah, so calling toward it. And then the 4th is sabr, patience upon the harms encountered.
And then it's evidence. طيب, al-ilm, when the author said al-ula, the first obligatory matter is al-ilm. What is the qasd of al-ilm? What's the meaning of al-ilm? Which type of ilm? It's all in the risala.
Yeah, of the Prophet.
معرفة الله ومعرفة دينه ومعرفة نبيه ومعرفة دين بالإسلام. Now say you give an answer. So what is the knowledge that the author is talking about? معرفة الله ومعرفة الدين ومعرفة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالأدلة, along with its evidences. Why did the author mention بالأدلة? Why did he mention these matters with the evidences?
The reason is that any action starts before knowledge. You have to learn knowledge and then action.
That's correct. And then the answer. Now, pay phones with
You have to know the evidences of Islam to act on it. If you don't know the evidence, like you just say your dad told you to listen to something, it's not the same as if you've heard the proof and then you believe in it yourself.
No. Any answer? We're all correct.
Questions in the group. We asked these questions in the group.
Yeah. But why al-adillah? What's the principle? We mentioned a principle.
So because if you don't know the evidences and you get asked those questions in your grave, you'd say because you just repeat what your forefathers told you.
No.
You believe it.
All of it's correct because there's a principle that the ulama have mentioned, التقليد لا ينفع في العقائد. That taqleed, basing your aqidah upon what others were upon, is of no benefit when it comes to aqidah. التقليد لا ينفع في العقائد. And the meaning of aqaid here is usul al-Islam. So when it comes to the usul of Islam, when it comes to aqaid, then you have to base your aqidah upon evidences. The meaning of that is, for example, we pray salawat al-khams. Do you pray salawat al-khams because your father said you have to pray it? Or because you know in the Qur'an Allah said aqimus salah? Because Allah said aqimus salah. So you are basing your salawat upon a dalil. Not because your father said it, not because it's what you do in your culture, no, because there's a dalil. And the meaning of knowing the evidences is meaning you heard the evidence once. As long as you heard the dalil once, even if you did not memorize it, even if you heard it and you forgot it, it doesn't matter. The point is that your aqidah and the usul of your Islam is based upon evidences, and it's not based upon ignorance. Then al-amal, acting upon it. Then ad-da'wah. And what are the two types of ad-da'wah? What are the two types of ad-da'wah?
Da'wah by action and da'wah by speech.
Ahsant. Ad-da'wah bil-maqal wal-da'wah bil-maqam. Da'wah, calling to Allah by your words, and calling to Allah through your actions. So da'wah is an obligation upon everybody, and that is the da'wah of actions. This is the obligation upon every single person. And as for da'wah in terms of words, like giving a khutbah, giving a lesson, writing a book, then this is fardu kifaya. This is for the ulama, the imams of the masajid, those who have knowledge, those who have authority, for example. Now, otherwise, the obligation upon every single Muslim is to give da'wah by way of your actions.
Because of your last lesson, what I learned, the first da'wah is removing ignorance from yourself first, and then your family. That's the basic.
No.
And then obviously somebody is like alim or whatever.
Then you close.
Alhamdulillah.
And then as-sabr. What's the meaning of as-sabr? The meaning of as-sabr, habsun nafs. Habsun nafs. To control yourself. Now to practice self-restraint. And what are the three types of as-sabr which the ulama mentioned? The three types of sabr.
First sabr is you have to do action like salat or whatever.
As-sabru ala ta'atillah. Being patient upon the
doing
obedience
good
to
actions.
Allah. No.
And stopping yourself from sins like al-kabair.
As-sabr an ma'asiyatillah. Being patient in staying away from.
Third is whatever is Allah has written in the taqdeer, like your death or
As-sabru
disease.
ala aqdarillah.
Sabr will be taqdeer.
And then after this, the author mentioned Surah Al-Asr, because إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and iman is built upon knowledge. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and this is al-amal. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, and this is al-da'wah. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and this is as-sabr. Then he mentioned the statement of Shafi'i rahimahullah, لَوْ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ حُجَّةً عَلَى خَلْقِ إِلَّا هَذِهِ سُورَةٌ كَفَتْهُ. And then he mentioned the statement of Al-Bukhari. Now what did Al-Bukhari say? What did Al-Bukhari say? Bab Ahsant. Bab al-ilm qabl al-qawli wal-amal. And where did Al-Bukhari say this? In his Sahih, in which book? Kitab al-Ilm. In the chapter or the book of Kitab al-Ilm within Sahih al-Bukhari. After this, we went through the second introduction. So in the second introduction, the author mentions 3 important principles which underpin all of the religion. They underpin all of the deen. And that is, firstly, that Allah subhanahu created us and He did not create us without a purpose. Because that is unbefitting of Al-Hakim Al-Alim. Al-Hakim Al-Alim subhanahu wa ta'ala will not do something for no reason or for no purpose. Because doing things without a purpose, without an objective, this is foolishness. This is safaha. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim Al-Hakim. So He does not do things without a purpose. And therefore, that shows that He created everything for a purpose. And that purpose, has it been left for our own intellect to think about? No. How was that purpose communicated to us? And the messengers. The sending of the messengers and the revealing of the books. And the messengers and the books, what did they teach us what that our purpose is? That's one purpose. Second one, we said there's 3 purposes behind our creation. Al-Ibadah, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ to the end of the ayah. Second,
To test us.
أحسنت, الابتلاء والاختبار. And what's the evidence? الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. The one who created death and life to test you. Now, so this shows that this is the second purpose behind our creations. And the third purpose?
To learn and know about Allah.
To learn about Allah subhanahu. Because He said, لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So you may know and learn that Allah's complete ability of everything. So there are 3 reasons why Allah subhanahu created us. Firstly, for His worship. Secondly, in order to test us. Thirdly, in order for us to learn about Him. This is why every single page of the Mus'haf has information regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single page of the Mus'haf has some information regarding Allah for us to learn about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. No? So this is the first principle. The second principle is that if you understand your purpose to worship Allah, then you have to know أن الله لا يرضى يشرك به أحد في عبادته. That Allah is not happy and pleased with any shirk in any of His ibadah. The first principle, know that Allah created you for a purpose and that purpose is to worship Him. First principle. Second principle, if you understand this, then know that Allah subhanahu does not accept shirk in His ibadah. Naam. And what's the evidence for this? Which evidence is the author mentioned? No.
Is it إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ?
No. But what's the evidence which the author mentioned?
I remember the other hadith says.
No, what's the وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. That's the ayah which the author mentioned. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. The masajid are for Allah, and so do not invoke others besides Allah. The meaning of masajid is not just a place of sujood, but meaning the places of ibadah. And the whole earth is a place of ibadah. Because in the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْض مَسْجِدًا وَطُهُورًا. That the whole earth has been made a masjid for me. Now meaning, the whole earth is a place of worship for Allah. You can pray salah anywhere. Your salah is not restricted to the masjid. If you're in the desert or in a mountain and the time for salah came, you don't have to go find a masjid. You pray wherever you are. If you're on a ship, if you're on an aeroplane, as I mentioned, if you're in a desert, on a mountain, wherever you are, if the time for salah comes, you pray your salah. So the whole earth is a masjid, meaning a place of worship. And then the third principle the author mentioned, that if you understand Allah created you for His worship, and you understand that Tawheed is the obligation and Shirk is haram and Allah does not accept a Shirk, then you have to understand Al-Wala wal-Bara. And Al-Wala wal-Bara means that your loving and your hatred and your associations and your disassociations and your friendships and your animosities have to be for the sake of Tawheed. So he said, rahimahullah, Man ata'a al-Rasul wa wahhad Allah. That the one who obeys the messenger and affirms the Tawheed of Allah, لا يجوز له موالاة من حاد الله ورسوله. It's not permitted for that person to have muwala of those who hate Allah and His messenger. And al-mawala, now what does al-mawala mean? What does al-mawala mean?
Does it mean support?
Support, but support based upon love, based upon muhabba. So the meaning of al-mawala is al-mawadda. And this is what the author intended. How do we know? Because look at the ayah. When he said that mawala for the enemies of Allah and His messenger are not permitted, is not permitted, then if you look at the ayah, what does the ayah say? No. What is that, brothers? You're not paying attention. Nobody's paying attention. Look at the text, know what page we're on, pay attention to my questions. So which ayah did the author bring?
لا تجد قوما يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر
يوادون. See, you loving. So when the author wanted to explain mawala, he mentioned an ayah which mentions mawadda, love. He said, لا تجد قوما يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر يوادون من حاد الله ورسوله. You will never find a people who have iman in Allah on the final day, yuwadun, and they love those who are enemies to Allah and His messenger, even if they are their fathers and their children, etc. So this shows us that mawala al-mushrikeen, aiding the mushrikeen over the Muslims. What is the hukam of aiding a mushrik over a Muslim? It is either haram, or haram and a major sin, or it is kufr akbar. So when is it kufr akbar and when is it haram and a major sin but not kufr akbar? If a person aids the mushrikun and the kuffar over the Muslims for a worldly reason, like bribery, like pressure, and he wants kursi, he wants authority, not for the love of the religion, just for a worldly reason, then this is a major sin. And if a person aids the mushrikeen over Ahlul Islam based upon mawadda, meaning loving what they are upon, loving kufr, loving their system, loving their laws over Al-Islam, then this is kufrun akbar, and it takes the person out of the fold of Al-Islam.
When you're speaking about kafir, do people who innovate in the religion also fall into that?
No. Kafir meaning somebody who professes kufr. Now, somebody says he's a Christian, Jew, Hindu, atheist, secularist, etc. So we're not talking about Muslims who are doing bid'ah. We don't call them, they're Muslims, alhamdulillah. We're talking about kuffar who profess to be kuffar. They don't call themselves Muslims. So this is the third principle. These three principles, you could summarize them. The first principle is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, that Allah created you and He created you for a purpose. And within it is al-Risala, that Allah sent messengers that you have to obey. This is the first principle. The second principle is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, the right of Allah to exclusive worship. The third principle is al-Wala wal-Bara. And al-Wala wal-Bara, it goes back to al-Mahabba. It goes back to a person loving Islam, loving Tawheed, loving La ilaha illallah, and having bughd for al-Kufr and its people. So the second introduction, the second muqaddimah, if we were to summarize the second muqaddimah, how would we summarize it? The second muqaddimah, which we just studied now. How could we summarize it? Summarize it means in the most concise terms you can mention.
The three principles. The first one.
There are three principles that every person has to know. These three principles underpin the religion for them.
That Allah created us with a purpose.
Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Allah subhanahu is our creator and He created us for a purpose, and within it is a risala, because He sent prophets and messengers to teach us that purpose. If you obey those prophets and messengers, you enter into Jannah. If a person disobeys those prophets and messengers, then he enters into the fire. The second principle,
The second principle is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah.
Ahsan, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. That in every act of ibadah, you have to have a Tawheed, and Allah hates every type of shirk. And then the third principle,
Al-Wala wal-Bara.
Ahsan, al-Wala wal-Bara. That your love and your alliances have to be for the people of Tawheed, the people of La ilaha illallah. Now, and then we go to the third muqaddimah, and yet we haven't entered Al-Usool Ath-Thalaatha. So what is the third muqaddimah? What is the summary of the third muqaddimah?
Follow Al-Hanafi.
Nam, Al-Hanifiyya. Al-Hanifiyya. Following Hanafiya is following Madhab al-Hanafi. Now, Al-Hanifiyya is from Millah Ibrahim alayhi salam, Millah to Ibrahim. And what is the meaning of Al-Hanif? What is the meaning of Al-Hanif? Ahsan. What's the meaning of Al-Hanif? Al-Millah Al-Ma'ila an al-Shirk Al-Mabni ala Tawheed. The path which turns away from shirk and is based upon Tawheed. That is the meaning of Al-Hanifiyya. Because Al-Hanaf, it means Al-Mail. And Al-Mail means to turn away from something or turn towards something. No. And if a person asks, where is the mention of Tawheed in the Qur'an? If a person asks, where is the mention of Tawheed in the Qur'an? What's the answer? If a person asks, where is the mention of Tawheed in the Qur'an? What's the answer?
Every ayah that mentions worship is.
Now, every ayah which mentions ibadah, its meaning is a Tawheed. And what's the evidence for this, or whose statement is this?
Ibn Abbas.
Now, the statement of Ibn Abbas. Now, like the author said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ وَمَعْنَى يَعْبُدُونَ يُوَحِّدُونَ. And the meaning of يَعْبُدُونَ is يُوَحِّدُونَ. And also, what's the other evidence I mentioned? What's the other evidence that ibadah in the Quran is synonymous with Tawheed? No. If you remember, I mentioned the ayah وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. And then we said that in this ayah, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا, there is a clear evidence that the intended meaning of ibadah is Tawheed in this ayah. Where's the shahid? Where is the shahid? Meaning, where's the point in this ayah? No. That means of Tawheed. Where's the shahid? Where's the shahid? Who knows?
I don't know the Arabic, but the power says, do not associate anything with worship along it.
No. You're all correct, but like pinpoint the shahid.
Is it Shay'a?
No. The shahid is that Allah subhanahu in this ayah mentions two opposites. One is wa'budullah, and the other opposite is la tushriku. طيب. What's the opposite of shirk? Tawheed. So when Allah subhanahu mentions the opposite of shirk, ayat Tawheed, which word did He use? Wa'budullah. So this shows us the meaning of wa'budullah is wahidullah, at-Tawheed. And also that ibadah is not ibadah without at-Tawheed. Like salah is not salah without wudu. From which, Risal from Al-Qawaid al-Arba'. Remember Al-Qawaid al-Arba', we studied this. I mentioned that if a person walks into the Masjid to pray Salat al-Dhuhr during the time of Dhuhr, and he faces the Qibla, and he says Allahu Akbar, and he does the sujood and the ruku and the Surah al-Fatiha and every single rukn and wajibat of as-salah ends with a-taslim, but he did not make wudu intentionally. He did it without making wudu. Do we call his action salah? No, we say that isn't salah what you did. If you did it intentionally, it isn't even salah. In fact, this is a major sin. And if a person prays salah without wudu intentionally, then that's a kabira, that's a major sin. We don't call his action salah. And in the Hanafi madhab, a person who prays salah without wudu intentionally, they said this is kufr. Now they said it is kufr. Why? Because it is a type of istihza bid-deen. hasn't joking and playing with the religion. And to do it intentionally, it means you're messing around with the religion of Allah, so they consider it to be a type of istihza. So it is kufr, but the majority of the fuqaha said that it is a major sin, but it doesn't go to the level of al-kufr. And then after this, the author said, وَأَعْظَمُ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ التَّوْحِيدُ وَهُوَ إِفْرَادُ اللَّهِ بِالْعِبَادَةِ. Now, what's the definition of tawheed? What's the definition of tawheed? Now, like the author said, إِفْرَادُ اللَّهِ بِالْعِبَادَةِ. إِفْرَادُ اللَّهِ بِالْعِبَادَةِ. And ikhwa, as advice, when I'm asking questions, especially when it comes to ta'rifat, any definitions, especially when it comes to adilla, evidences, especially when it comes to principles, try as much as you can to answer in Arabic. Now try to memorize in Arabic and answer in Arabic as much as you can, because what this will do, this will cultivate your mind, train your mind to read the books of the ulama. So you're not having to translate in your mind and then give an answer in Arabic. No, you're memorizing in Arabic, you're understanding in Arabic, and then in the future train your mind to read the books of the ulama, to read the books of Arabic. And it's easy. If I say, Ifradullah bil ibadah, now it's what the author said anyway. Now, so try to memorize, especially, and if you can't memorize the whole matan, no problem. At least memorize the ta'rifat, memorize the evidences, memorize the taqsimat. So if I said, for example, and in the first muqaddimah, what are the 4 obligations that the author mentions? Al-ilm, wal-amal, wal-da'wa, wal-sabr. Easy, you don't need to translate. If I say to you, what is the intended meaning of al-ilm? Easy, ma'rifatul abd, rabbahu, wa nabiyahu, wa deenahu, bil adillah. So try to memorize as much as you can and answer in Arabic. Al-Muhim, the author said, At-Tawheed, what is it? Ifradullahi bil-ibadah. To single out Allah in al-ibadah. And what is ash-shirk? What did the author say ash-shirk is? Da'watu ghayrihi ma'hu. Meaning, da'watu ghayrillah ma'allah. To invoke others besides Allah along with Allah. To invoke others besides Allah along with Allah. Of course, the definition of Tawheed which is given here is the definition of Tawheed al-Uluhiyya. And this is the intended meaning of At-Tawheed. The core of Tawheed is Tawheed al-Uluhiyya. Even though we say Tawheed is al-Rububiyya, wal-Uluhiyya, wal-Asma, wal-Sifat, but the core of Tawheed, it is Ibadatullahi wahdahu. And that's why the author said that Tawheed is Ifradullahi bil-Ibadah. And this is, as he said, أعظم ما أمر الله. The greatest thing which Allah has ordered us with is this. And ash-shirk is the most severe sin and the greatest thing which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us from. So all of this we covered in the previous lesson. Now we come to the core of the Risala, and that is فَإِذَا قِيلَ لَكَ. And if it is said to you, مَا الْأُصُولُ الثَّلَاثَةُ الَّتِي يَجِبُ عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ مَعْرِفَتُهَا. If it is said to you, what are the 3 principles which every single person should know? فَقُلْ, then say, معرفة العبد ربه ودينه ونبيه محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم. A person knowing his Lord, his religion, and his Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. And of course, why are these 3 principles an obligation upon every single Muslim? Because they're the questions in the grave. Because they're the questions in the grave. So we have to know them, and we have to act by them and implement them. And this is the obligation. You have to read that.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولجميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فإذا قيل لك ما الأصول الثلاثة التي يجب على الإنسان معرفتها فقل معرفة العبد ربه ودينه ونبيه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. فإذا قيل لك من ربك فقل ربي الله الذي رباني وربى جميع العالمين بنعمه وهو معبودي ليس لي معبود سواه. والدليل قوله تعالى الحمد لله رب العالمين وكل من سوى الله عالم وأنا واحد من ذلك العالم.
So the first principle is Man Rabbuk, who is your Rabb. So if you're asked who is your Lord? فَقُل, then say, Rabbi Allah. Then my Rabb, He is Allah. Rabbani wa Rabba jami' al-alamina bi-ni'amihi. Because He, Rabbani, He gave me tarbiyah. And He gave tarbiyah to all creation. The point is that the word Ar-Rabb, it is taken from a tarbiyah. What does tarbiyah mean? When to nurture somebody, to sustain somebody, to help somebody grow. So who nurtures, who sustains me, you and all of creation? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why we call Him our Rabb. And how does He nurture us? Yani this tarbiyah, what is the form of this tarbiyah? Two. Tarbiyatul ajsam, the tarbiyah which is physical sustenance, food, drink, clothing, aql, skills, strength, which He has given to humans and non-humans, birds, animals, etc. This is one type of tarbiyah. And then the other second of tarbiyah is the tarbiyah of al-iman. The tarbiyah of al-wahi, and how He nurtured us in terms of our aqeedah and our al-Islam. And the Ar-Rabb, the blessed name of Allah, Ar-Rabb, its meaning or its definition is Al-Mutafarridu bil-Khalqi wal-Mulki wal-Tasarruf wal-Tadbir. The meaning of Ar-Rabb, Al-Mutafarrid bil-Khalq wal-Mulk wal-Tasarruf wal-Tadbir, meaning the only one who creates, the only one who has complete mulk, and the only one who controls. This is Ar-Rabb. Ar-Rabb, the one who creates, the one who sustains, the one who owns, and the one who controls. And this is why Tawheedul Rububiyyah, they say, Ifradullahi bil khalqi wal rizqi wal mulki wal tadbir. It is to single out Allah, that He is the only Khaliq, He is the only Malik, He is the only Raziq, He is the only Mudabbir, the only controller. Why? Because Ar-Rabb is Al-Khaliq, Al-Malik, Al-Raziq, Al-Mudabbir. Now that is Ar-Rabb. And Ar-Rabb is one of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. However, this word Rabb, Ra and Ba, it is not exclusive to Allah. The word Rabb is not exclusive to Allah. Because Rabb also means an owner. So for example, Anta Rabbul Bayt. You can say Rabbul Bayt. I mean, you're the owner of your house. Now that person is called Rabb. And you can say, for example, Rabb al-Mazra'ah. Who is the Rabb of this farm? I mean, the owner of the farm. So the word Rabb is not exclusive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it is connected to something. Like I said, the Rabb of the house, the Rabb of the farm, meaning the owner. As for Ar-Rabb, Alif Lam Ar-Rabb, then that is for Allah alone. Ar-Rabb meaning the sole creator, the sole provider, the sole sustainer, the sole controller. That is Ar-Rabb. So, and where does Ar-Rabb come from? Rabbani wa Rabba jami' al-alameen. The one who has nurtured me and nurtured all of creation. Nurtured us physically through a rizq and sustenance, and then also nurtured us in terms of al-wahi and revelation. He said, وَهُوَ مَعْبُودِي لَيْسَ مَعْبُودٌ سِوَهُ. And He is the one who I worship, and I do not worship anybody else besides Him. So the author, he explained Ar-Rabb as being Al-Ma'bud. The author, he explained Ar-Rabb as being Al-Ma'bud, meaning the one who is deserving of your worship. Because a person merely affirming Allah is the creator will not save him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You have to also affirm His Tawheed. Understood? Because we know from the Mushrikun that they accepted Al-Rububiyyah. The Mushrikun we studied in Al-Qaida Al-Arba, they accepted Al-Rububiyyah. So just affirming that Allah is the Rabb and the Creator is not sufficient. Rather, you have to affirm that He is the only one who is deserving of worship. And therefore, the intent behind Tawheed al-Rububiyyah is to affirm Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. The intent behind Tawheed al-Rububiyyah is to affirm Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And this is why we said Tawheed al-Rububiyyah tastalzim Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. That a person affirming the rububiyyah of Allah, it necessitates that he affirms the uluhiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, and for this reason, every ayah in the Qur'an which mentions the rububiyyah of Allah, its intent is to worship Him alone. Its intent is to worship Him alone, and we will come to this in a short while. I need the evidence for this. But what is the evidence that Allah Rabba al-Alameen? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Alhamd is for Allah, and He's the Rabb of al-Alameen, meaning Rabba al-Alameen. He's the one who has nurtured and sustains all creation. And what is Alam? He said, Kullu ma siwa Allah Alam. That everything and every person besides Allah is Alam. وَأَنَا وَاحِدٌ مِّن ذَلِكَ الْعَالَمِ. And I am one of those that Alam, meaning everything which is created. So Alam means everything besides Allah, from all the various kingdoms and all the various different types of creation. And how do we know, or what is the evidence that the intended meaning behind Ar-Rabb is Al-Ma'bud? And this principle which I mentioned, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah tastalzim Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. That affirming the Rububiyyah of Allah necessitates affirming the Uluhiyyah of Allah. This is taken from the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum. O people, worship your Lord. So look how Ar-Rububiyyah was connected to Al-Uluhiyyah, Al-Ibad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O people, worship your Rabb, the one who created you and those who came before you, la'allakum tattaqun. He said, Alladhi ja'ala lakum al-ardha firasha, the one who made the earth like a place of resting for you, was-samaa'a binaa'a, and He placed the sky above you as a ceiling. وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, and then He sends down rain from the skies. فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ, and then He produces growth and vegetation as a sustenance for you. All of this is His rububiyyah. Now Allah is mentioning His rububiyyah. He created you, He created those who came before you, He provides you sustenance, He made the earth for you, He brings about Ath-Thalaatha, etc. And then what's the end of the ayah? فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So do not make partners for Allah, meaning in ibadah, and you know. So this ayah is an evidence that Ar-Rububiyyah tastalzim Al-Uluhiyyah. Affirming the Rububiyyah of Allah, it necessitates from you that you worship Allah alone. And did the battle between the messengers and the people, was it fought on Ar-Rububiyyah? No. What was fought on? Al-Uluhiyyah. Now, the people to whom the messengers were sent, they never fought or contended with the prophets over Ar-Rububiyyah. They never fought against them that Allah is the only creator. If Prophet Muhammad told Abu Jahl that my message is, I just want you to accept that Allah is the only creator, he'd say, I'm a Muslim. But he knew that it means you have to do it with all of your gods and all of your lords, and you have to worship Allah alone. And this is what they did not accept. And this is why they did not accept La ilaha illallah, because they understood the meaning of La ilaha illallah is not La khaliqa illallah, and it's not La rabba illallah. They knew it means La ma'buda illallah. There is none worthy of worship except Allah. And this is why they said, جَعَلَ آلِهَتَنَا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. That has He, Muhammad, come and made all of our gods and makes into a single God? This is something which is strange. So they understood that if we have to affirm the rububiyyah of Allah, it necessitates from us affirming the uluhiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, and obviously in Al-Qa'idah Al-Rabba, we mentioned all the evidences in the first principle that the mushrikun affirmed the rububiyyah. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لِيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. If you were to ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say it is Allah. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. If you were to ask them who created them, they will say, surely it is Allah. So we studied previously how the mushrikun used to affirm the rububiyyah of Allah, but the battle was over al-uluhiyyah. Let's write that principle down. توحيد الربوبية يستلزم توحيد الألوهية. Write in Arabic if you can. توحيد الربوبية يستلزم توحيد الألوهية. Meaning a person affirming the rububiyyah of Allah, it necessitates from him affirming the uluhiyyah of Allah. And if a person affirms the rububiyyah of Allah, but then does not worship Allah alone, then that rububiyyah will not save him on Yawm al-Qiyamah.
فإذا قيل لك بما عرفت ربك فقل بآياته ومخلوقاته ومن آياته الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر ومن مخلوقاته السماوات السبع والأرضون السبع ومن فيهن وما بينهما والدليل قوله تعالى ومن آياته الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر لا تسجدوا للشمس ولا للقمر واسجدوا لله الذي خلقهن إن كنتم إياه تعبدون وقوله تعالى إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يغشي الليل النهار يطلبه حثيثا والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره ألا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله رب العالمين. والرب هو المعبود والدليل قوله تعالى يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون الذي جعل لكم الأرض فراشا والسماء بناء وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم فلا تجعلوا لله أندادا وأنتم تعلمون. قال ابن كثير الخالق لهذه الأشياء هو المستحق للعبادة وأنواع العبادة التي أمر الله بها مثل الإسلام والإيمان والإحسان ومنه الدعاء والخوف والرجاء والتوكل والرغبة والرهبة والخشوع والخشية والإنابة والاستعانة والاستعاذة والاستغاثة والذبح والنذر وغير ذلك من أنواع العبادة التي أمر الله بها كلها لله تعالى والدليل قوله تعالى.
Then the author said فإذا قيل لك Then the author said فإذا قيل لك بما عرفت ربك. If it is said to you, how have you come to know of your Rabb? Meaning, how do you know and what has made you believe that Allah is the Rabb, that Allah subhanahu He is the sole creator, the sole provider, the sustainer, and He's the one who is deserving of worship? Then say, فَقُلْ بِآيَاتِهِ وَمَخْلُوقَاتِهِ. Then say, I know of my Lord through His ayat and His makhluqat. And what are His ayat? Al-laylu wal-naharu wal-shamsu wal-qamar. The night and the day and the sun and the moon. وَمِن مَخْلُوقَاتِ and His creation, like as-samawatu as-sab', like the 7 heavens, وَالْأَرْضُونَ as-sab', and the 7 earths, وَمَنْ فِيهِنَّ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا, that which is within them and that which is between them. Now, the author, he differentiated between ayat and makhluqat, even though all of them are His makhluqat. So the night and the day and the sun and the moon, they are the makhluqat of Allah, they are the creation of Allah. Just as the heavens and the earth is the creation of Allah. So why did the author differentiate between ayat and makhluqat, even though the ayat are from the makhluqat of Allah? The ulama mentioned that the ayat, that which the author called ayat, are more clear in terms of proving the existence of the Creator than the makhluqat. Why? because these ayat, they change. And the makhluqat, they remain the same. Meaning, the earth and the sky, it is as you see it. It doesn't change. But the night comes and it goes. The day comes and it goes. The sun moves. The moon appears and it disappears. The sun appears and disappears. So all of that movement and the coming and the going, it will cause a person to ask that who has caused it to come and go, and who caused this night and day to appear and disappear. And so the ayat are more clear in terms of proving that there's something, so there's somebody who is behind all of this and is not moving any on its own, as opposed to the earth, which remains stable, and we don't see it changing in front of you or appearing or disappearing. And this is why Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he wanted to prove the uluhiyya of Allah, he saw the sun moving and he saw the moon moving, etc. And this is where he eliminated the existence of other gods. You know, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why the author differentiated between the ayat and makhluqat. Otherwise the ayat are the makhluqat of Allah. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the ayat which he mentioned, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and from his ayat are the layl, the night, وَالنَّهَار, and the day, وَالشَّمْس, the sun, وَالْقَمَرْ, the moon. لَا تَسْجُدُوا لِلشَّمْسِ وَلَا لِلْقَمَرِ, do not make sujood in front of the sun or the moon. وَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ, make sujood in front of Allah, الَّذِي خَلَقَهُنَّ, the one who created them, إِن كُنْتُمْ إِيَّهُ تَعْبُدُونَ, if you truly intend to worship him. And then the author also said, وَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى, and also his saying, إِنَّ رَبَّكُمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ. Verily, your Rabb is the one who created the samawat and the earth in 6 days. ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ, and then he arose above the throne, and then he arose above the arsh. No. And then the author said, وَالرَّبُّ هُوَ الْمَعْبُودُ. And this is the principle which we mentioned, that al-rububiyyah yastalzim al-uluhiyyah, because the intended meaning of al-Rabb is that then he has to be your ma'bud. So affirming his rububiyyah without affirming his ubudiyyah or his uluhiyyah is of no benefit. And he mentions the ayah which I mentioned previously, and the evidence of this principle that al-Rabb, he is al-ma'bud, is Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu. So Allah subhanahu begins with Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, u'budu. And he ends with Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا. And throughout the whole ayah he mentions his rububiyyah. Meaning Allah subhanahu only mentions his rububiyyah to affirm accepting his al-Uluhiyyah. And this is every single ayah in the Qur'an. Any ayah in the Qur'an in which Allah subhanahu mentions his creation, mentions the earth, mentions the sun, mentions the moon, mentions his rizq, every single ayah is there to tell the people to worship him alone. Naam. Because the Quraysh, they knew and they accepted the rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Ibn Kathir in his tafsir, he said, الخالق لهذه الأشياء هو المستحق للعبادة. The creator of all of these things, the ayat and the makhluqat, he is the one who is deserving of al-ibadah. Meaning, al-rububiyyah yastalzim al-uluhiyyah. Affirming that he is the creator, affirming that he is the Rabb, it necessitates you worshipping Allah alone. From the ayat that the author mentioned. And also this is an important point for us to understand. Why do we worship Allah? If somebody said, why do you worship Allah? Why don't you worship Jesus? Why do you worship that idol? Why don't you worship what the Hindus worship? Why do you worship what the Buddhists worship? Why do you worship Allah? What's the answer?
Is it Allah's right upon us?
But why do you worship him? Why not Jesus? And what did you say, Mama?
Because of his rububiyyah.
Because Allah created everything. That's the answer. The reason why we worship Allah, because Rabbani wa Rabba Jameel Alameen bi ni'amihi wa min ayatihi wa everything which the author mentioned. This is why we worship Allah. Meaning, if you was to ask a Hindu, why do you worship the idol? Even the Hindu cannot profess that the idol created everything. Even if you ask a Christian, why do you worship Jesus? Did the Son create everything? Did he create the earth? And they say, no, the Father created everything. So even the Christians cannot profess in their own faith that he created everything. Whereas the Muslim, we say, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. And this is why when Allah subhanahu in the Qur'an wants to negate the right of anybody else besides him to be worshipped, he negates their rububiyyah. For example, what did Allah subhanahu say about Isa alayhi salam and his mother? He said, Mal Masih ibn Maryam illa Rasul qad khalat min qablihi rusul wa ummuhu siddiqa. He said that Al-Masih ibn Maryam, he was nothing except a messenger, just like many messengers who came before him. Wa ummuhu siddiqa, and his mother was a truthful, pious woman. He said, next in the ayah, who knows? Naam Hasan. Kana ya'kulan al-ta'am. They both used to eat food. Why did Allah subhanahu mention that they both used to eat food? Why? To negate the fact of, to negate their rububiyyah. So once their rububiyyah is negated, the fact they used to eat food. And then everything which is connected to food. I mean, they used to eat and drink. If they didn't eat or drink, they would die. Now, they had a need to digest. When that food was digested, they had a need to go to the toilet, akramakumullah. Now, sometimes that food may harm them if it was poisonous, or it may benefit them, and maybe they would become ill, and everything which is connected to that. And if they eat food, they would become weak. All of this is negating their rububiyyah. Once their rububiyyah is negated, then their uluhiyyah has to be negated. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Kana ya'kulan al-ta'am. Like, don't you think, even logically, that they used to eat food? So if they were al-Khaliq, if they are the ma'bud, then they wouldn't need to eat food. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Undur kayfa nubayyinu lahumul ayat. Look how we make these ayat clear to them. It's clear to them that they have no rububiyyah, therefore they are not deserving of al-uluhiyyah. And this is the principle which we mentioned, al-rububiyyah tastalzim al-uluhiyyah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Tur, Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun. That were they created from nothing, or were they the ones who were created, or were they the creators? These idols, did they create themselves, and did they create everything else? So if their rububiyyah and their creation and their sustenance, it is negated, then also their uluhiyyah has to be negated. So only Allah subhanahu remains. Then the author said, وأنواع العبادة التي أمر الله بها مثل الإسلام والإيمان والإحسان. To the end of the passage, he said that all of that has to be for Allah alone. Meaning, if we affirm the rububiyyah of Allah, and this necessitates from us that we affirm the uluhiyyah of Allah, then you have to know that every type of ibadah is for Allah alone. Every type of ibadah is for Allah alone. And then he mentions the different types of ibadah. Al-Islam, meaning the whole religion. Wal-Iman, what refers to a person's aqidah. Wal-Ihsan, and then dua, khawf, raja, tawakkul, raghba, rahba, khushu, al-khashya, al-inaba, al-isti'an, al-isti'adha, al-istighatha, al-dhabh, al-nadhar, wa ghayru dhalik. And all of the other acts of ibadah, all of them have to be for Allah alone. So now after this, the author, he begins mentioning different types of ibadah. And the word ibadah, as you know, and we studied this previously, has different ta'rifat. In different ulama, they defined the word al-ibadah with different types of ta'rifat. All of them, they center or revolve around the same thing. Some of them said at-ta'alluh wa tadhallul lillah. That ibadah is for a person to at-tadhallul, and to submit himself in front of Allah and fulfill the commands with mahabba and at-ta'zim. They said at-ta'alluh wa tadhallul lillahi وَالْإِنْقِيَادُ لَهُ بِفِعْلِ مَا أَمَرَ بِهِ وَتَرْكِ مَا نَهَى عَنْهُ مَحَبَّةً وَتَعْظِيمًا. The meaning or the definition of ibadah is at-ta'alluh. At-ta'alluh meaning affirming the uluhiyya of Allah. وَالتَّذَلُّلُ meaning having complete humility and submitting yourself to the of Allah. وَالْإِنْقِيَادُ and complying to what Allah has ordered to do or forbade from leaving. Based upon your mahabba and your ta'zim, based upon your complete love and exaltation of Allah. And mentioned previously Ibn Taymiyyah, what's the definition he gave of al-ibadah? What's the definition? Ismun jami'un li kulli ma yuhibbu Allah wa yarda min al-aqwal wal af'al al-batina wal zahira. That it is a comprehensive term for everything which Allah loves and is pleased with, statements or actions, inward or apparent. طبعا the first ta'rif of ibadah which we mentioned, التأله والتذلل نعم محبة وتعظيما, that refers to the person performing the action. And as for the second ta'rif, it refers to the action itself. Meaning, salah. Salah is ibadah. It's ibadah from two angles. It's ibadah from the angle of your ta'alluh and your tadallul and your inqiyad, the fact that you are doing this action based upon your submission to Allah and submission to the command of Allah and compliance with the command of Allah. This is ibadah. And from the other angle, it is ibadah because it is something which Allah loves and is pleased with, whether it's a statement or an action. So both of these definitions, both of them are correct, except that one refers to you acting and why you're doing it, and the other one, what Ibn Taymiyyah said, refers to the action itself. And the action itself, that is something which Allah subhanahu loves. And then the author mentioned different types of ibadah. Notice, obviously we're going to cover these in detail, that's why I'm going through them quickly. Next lesson we'll cover each one in detail. These ibadat which the author mentioned, he did not mention salah, he did not mention zakah, he did not mention hajj, he did not mention Ramadan, for example, but he mentioned al-khushu' wal-raghba wal-rahba wal-khawf wal-tawakkul wal-isti'ana wal-dhabh. Why did he leave off mentioning those great ibadat like salah and zakat, the greatest ibadat, and yet he mentioned al-raja wal-tawakkul wal-khushu wal-inaba wal-isti'ana? What's the reason? Because the majority of shirk, it occurs in these ibadat. 99.9% of people who even are falling into shirk, it's not in their salah. Now, when they come to the masjid to pray salah, if you ask them, who you praying salah? They say, we're praying to Allah, of course. We don't pray salah to a wali, we pray to Allah, we're facing the qibla, we come to the house of Allah. Now, but when it comes to isti'ana and istighatha and al-khawf and al-mahabba and al-raja, then you find them turning to the awliya and the salihin and the murshideen. So the reason why the author mentioned these ibadat specifically is because this is where the shirk is occurring. Ramadan, does anybody ever fast the fast of Ramadan for any wali? Never. For any salih and murshid, no, always fast for Allah. Everybody knows Ramadan is for the sake of Allah. But when it comes to dhabh, then Abdul Qadir, Al-Ghawthi A'azam, Al-Badawi, Al-Hasan, Al-Hussein, etc. So he mentioned these because this is where the shirk it occurs. Yani he wanted to emphasize that it's not only al-ibadat al-zahira in which you have to have tawheed like as-salah, az-zakah, but it's also al-ibadat al-batina. Now the ibadah which is within your heart, like those ibadat which he mentioned, which also has to be for the sake of Allah alone. He said, كُلُّهَا لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى. All of them have to be for Allah. Why? وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. The meaning of فَلَا تَدْعُوا, that the places of worship are for Allah alone, فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, it does not mean do not make dua for other than Allah. It means do not worship other than Allah. Because dua is two types. Na'am, dua is two types. Dua al-mas'ala wa dua al-ibadah. Dua al-mas'ala meaning when a person asks Allah a request. Oh Allah, forgive me, oh Allah, give me. This is dua al-mas'ala. Then the other meaning of dua is dua al-ibadah, meaning ibadah. So for example, the evidence is the ayah itself. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, because the meaning of masajid is places of ibadah. It's not restricted to the masjid meaning physical masjid. So the meaning of فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا mean do not worship anybody else besides Allah. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Al-Hajj Arafah. Al-Hajj, it is Arafah. Does that mean that there's no other part of Hajj except Yom Arafah? No. But Yom Arafah is one of the core aspects of Al-Hajj. Otherwise, the whole Hajj has to be fulfilled. So like this, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, meaning every single act of ibadah is for Allah alone. And this is the shahid in the ayah. He said, فَمَنْ صَرَفَ مِنْهَا شَيْءٌ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ مُشْرِكٌ كَافِرٌ. That anybody who directs any type of ibadah to other than Allah, then he is mushrik kafir, meaning kufrun akbar, shirkun akbar. So what is shirkun akbar? It is sarful ibadah li ghayrillah, directing ibadah to other than Allah. The ulama, they categorize shirk in three types. We studied this in Al-Qaida al-Arba'a. Now what are they? The three types of shirk. Three types of shirk. The three types of shirk. الخفي. الشرك الأكبر, الشرك الأصغر, الشرك الخفي. What is الشرك الأكبر? Is this one of the questions in the exam? I think maybe it'll come up. Now, what is الشرك الأكبر?
Major shirk.
Now, what is الشرك الأكبر? I mean, what is the definition, the ta'rif of shirk al-akbar?
Is it that it annuls all of your good deeds, and it's a means of you entering Jahannam, and it's a means of you never leaving Jahannam?
كل ما أطلق الشارع عليه شرك وهو مخرج من الملة. Anything which the Sharia has called shirk and it takes a person out of the fold of Islam, that is known as shirk al-akbar. Now, like the examples which the author gave, slaughtering for other than Allah, supplicate to other than Allah, making tawaf around a person's grave. All of this is shirk al-akbar. It takes a person out of the fold of Islam. A shirk al-asghar is that which has been called shirk, but it does not take a person out of the fold of Islam. Like shirk of wording. Na'am. Al-half bi ghayrillah, taking oath by other than Allah. Saying ma sha Allah wa shi't, saying whatever Allah wants and you want. This is a shirk in wording, because in your wording you have equated somebody with Allah. In your wording, you said, I swear, and a person says he swears by his mother, and we know the half is for Allah alone. If you ask that person, do you intend by this that your mother is equal to Allah? I said, no, I'm just saying my mother is somebody special. Okay, it's a shirk in wording, but it's not kufr akbar which takes a person out of following Islam. You know, when the man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, ma sha Allah wa shi'ta, O Messenger of Allah, whatever you want or whatever Allah wants. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? Aja'altani lillahi nidda, have you made me a partner to Allah? He knows that the person's intent is not that the will of the Prophet is like the will of Allah. Just as Allah controls creation, the Prophet controls creation. No. But in wording, there is equating between Allah and His Messenger. Just in wording, not by intent. So we say it is shirkun asghar, just in wording. Now it doesn't take the person out of the fold of al-Islam. And then there is a shirk al-khafi, hidden shirk. And that is a riya al-yasir, small amounts of riya, which affects many people. Like for example, you're reciting the Qur'an. You're reciting the Qur'an purely for the sake of Allah. And then your teacher walks in. So you beautify your voice a little bit. Now, shirkun khafi, a little bit of riya which has entered into the heart. It's not the riya of the munafiqun. The munafiqun, yura'un al-nas. They only pray for the sake of the people. They don't pray for Allah, it's only for the sake of the people. Alladhina hum yura'un. Those who, when they pray, the whole niyyah is ar-riya. This is shirkul akbar, because you're doing it for other than Allah. But as for doing the ibadah for the sake of Allah, and then it's a bit of riya, into how that many people are affected with, then this is shirkul khafi, meaning it's hidden. It's not kufr akbar, it's hidden shirk, and you have to try to fight it. You have to make jihad against ash-shaytan. But the shirk which the author is referring to is shirkul akbar, the major shirk which takes the person out of full Islam. What's the evidence for this? وَمَنْ يَدْعُو مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ لَا بُرْهَانَ لَهُ بِهِ فَإِنَّمَا حِسَابُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Allah subhanahu said, and whoever يَدْعُو مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, whoever, the meaning of dua is ibadah, whoever invokes and worships besides Allah any other ilah, لا برهان له به, for which he has no burhan, proof, then his reckoning is with Allah. إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And the meaning of لا برهان له به is not that this is a condition. This is called in Arabic sifa kashifa. So when Allah said, whoever invokes anybody else besides Allah for which he has no evidence, it doesn't mean that therefore if you have some burhan, some evidence, then it is valid. No, I mean there is no burhan. Sifa kashifa. There is no burhan, there is no evidence for this. Then Allah said, فَإِنَّمَا حِسَابُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. طيب, where is the shahid in this ayah for what the author said? The author said, مَنْ صَرَفَ مِنْهَا شَيْئًا لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ مُشْرِكٌ كَافِرٌ. Then he mentioned this ayah. Where is the shahid, meaning where is the point? Where is the angle in this ayah to prove what the author is saying? What bit of the ayah proves what the author is saying? Now who knows? Luqman, what do you think? What's the shahid in the ayah?
Is it indeed the disbelievers? Well?
Ahsan. Because Allah said, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. So He called those people, مَنْ يَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, He called them kafirun. So diverting or directing any act of ibadah to other than Allah, then it is mushrik, then that person is a mushrikun, kafirun, as the author, rahimahullah, mentioned. And then after this, he then began going through every type of ibadah. So you'll see in the next lesson, he'll talk about dua and the evidence that directing dua to other than Allah is kufr and shirk. And then he'll mention al-khawf, and then he'll mention a specific evidence that directing khawf to other than Allah is kufr and shirk. And then he'll mention al-dhabh, wal-isti'ana, wal-isti'adha, wal-raghba, wal-rahba, wal-khushu, wal-inaba, all of them. And then he'll mention specific evidence that if you direct this to other than Allah, it is shirk and kufr. There's two ways to prove that directing an act of ibadah to other than Allah, it is shirk and kufr. There's a general way, a general evidence and a specific evidence. The general evidence is to firstly prove that dua, it is ibadah. And we know the general evidence that directing ibadah to other than Allah is shirk. So if you can prove to me that khawf is ibadah, and you've already told me that directing ibadah to other than Allah is shirk, then that means directing khawf to other than Allah, it is a shirk. This is like an underlying principle. Prove that this action is ibadah, and then I know that directing ibadah to Allah, it is a shirk. The other ways mentioning specific evidence for every type of action. So you mean, like the author, he mentions khawf, then he mentions specific evidence that directing khawf to other than Allah, it is a shirk. Now the main question is, how do we know that something is ibadah? How do we know that khawf or raja or dhabh, how do we know it is ibadah? This is very good space. If Allah subhanahu orders with something, if the Sharia orders with something, then you know that it is ibadah. Now, when we say, when Allah orders with something, when the Sharia orders with something, meaning Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah and His Messenger. So if it is ordered in the Qur'an or the Hadith, then we know it is ibadah. When we say Allah orders with something, meaning either is wajib or mustahab, either is wajib or nafal, but we know that it is ibadah. The second way is if Allah condemns or rebukes abandoning it. If in the Quran, if the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if they condemn abandoning an action, then we know it is ibadah. Then that action, it is ibadah. If Allah subhanahu praises its people, or the Messenger praises the people of that action, then we know it is ibadah. If Allah mentions a reward for that action or a punishment for its abandonment, then we know it is ibadah. If a reward is mentioned for a particular action, we know it is ibadah. And if Allah affirms His love for that action, we know it is ibadah. So the point is, these are different ways of knowing something or establishing something as being ibadah. Either Allah and His Messenger order for it to be done, or they condemn its abandonment, or its people are praised, or a reward is mentioned for that thing, or the love of Allah is mentioned for that thing or its people. Naam. Inna Allaha yuhibbul muhsinin. That affirms that ihsan is ibadah. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Allah is with those who are patient. That affirms that as-sabr is al-ibadah, etc. So these are the different ways of knowing something is ibadah. So the point is that if you wanted to give da'wah to somebody and warn him against committing an act of shirk and type of ibadah, there's two ways of doing this. If you don't know the specific evidence, then if you affirm that that action is ibadah, and then affirm وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا مَنْ يَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. And you mention the general principle. Or you mention that look, khawf itself, if you direct it to other than Allah, it is shirk, and this is the evidence of khawf, directed khawf to other than Allah is a shirk. So there's either a general principle you can mention, or you can mention a specific evidence. Notice what the author did. What we studied so far, he mentioned the general principles. He mentioned the ibadah, he mentioned the meaning of ibadah, and then he mentioned the general principle that you're not allowed to direct ibadah to other than Allah. That's the first method. And in the next lessons, he's going to go through every single thing that he's mentioned and tell us that it's haram to direct this to other than Allah. It is a shirk. And that's the second method which is being employed now. But it will suffice with that for this lesson. And let's quickly go through the exam. The exam from Al-Qawaid Al-Arba. Okay, let's quickly go through the exam, inshallah. Firstly, why did the author begin his treatise with Basmala? Who knows?
To seek blessings by Allah and to follow the example of the Muslims.
Excellent. Two things, tabarrukan wa iqtida'an. Tabarrukan wa iqtida'an. Tabarrukan, meaning seeking barakah by mentioning the name of Allah. Iqtida'an, meaning following the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where how he would begin his letters with Bismillah, and how he begin his wudu with Bismillah, and how he would leave his house with Bismillah wa tawakkaltu Allah, and how he would enter his masjid with Bismillah, and how he would begin wearing new clothes with Bismillah, and how he would begin eating with Bismillah. Naam. So this is al-iqtida, following the example of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What is the difference between the beautiful names of our Lord Allah and Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim? Meaning, what is the definition or the difference between these names? And so, what is the meaning of Allah, or where does this name come from?
Ar-Rahman is the most merciful.
No, Allah. First is the best name Allah.
What is the comfort is derived from Al-Uluhiyyah.
Ahsan, from Al-Uluhiyyah, meaning the one who is deserving of worship, the one who has exclusive right to Al-Ibadah. Now, Al-Uluhiyyah meaning Al-Ubudiyyah. And we said that Tawheed Al-Uluhiyyah, sometimes the ulama call it Tawheed Al-Uluhiyyah, sometimes they call it Tawheed al-Ilahiyya, sometimes they call it Tawheed al-Ibadah, sometimes they call it Tawheed al-Ubudiyyah. It means the same thing. The right of Allah for al-Ibadah. طيب, Ar-Rahman, what is the definition of Ar-Rahman? Who knows? What is the definition of Ar-Rahman?
Is that the essence of Allah's mercy?
Now, the Rahmah al-Wasi'ah, the essence of Allah, which is possessing of vast amounts of Rahmah. And Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahim, has anybody answered the, and have you written the answer in your exam? Have you got it in your exam?
Okay.
What have you written? You get priority.
Ar-Rahim.
Huh?
For
Yeah, Ar-Rahim.
I wrote a specific message shown to the believers.
Now, that's one expression that they gave. وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. That's the one.
Is it the act of Allah?
That's the action of Allah subhanahu, that He bestows mercy. Now, what outcome is hoped from studying and understanding Al-Qawaid Al-Arba'? What answers have you given?
For the common Muslim to be able to understand and differentiate between Tawheed and Shirk.
Now, it's there so we can distinguish between what is shirk and what is tawheed, and when is ibadah tawheed and valid, or when is it shirk and therefore invalid. طيب, define tawheed and define a shirk. Define tawheed and define a shirk. So who knows the ta'rif of tawheed? Now, طبعا, when we say define, there's a difference between ta'rif and tarjama. So tarjama means to translate. Find an English word which is the closest translation to Tawheed. So if I said to you, translate Tawheed, and you said monotheism, that's a translation. But it doesn't mean much to me. But if we say to you, define a Tawheed, arif a Tawheed, then you have to come with a concise explanation of a Tawheed. And this is why the ta'rifat, they are formulated by the fuqaha. And when the fuqaha, when they make ta'rif of salah, they've thought about that ta'rif very, very carefully. And they've tried to make it as precise as possible. And they make it shamilun mani'un. Shamil, meaning it covers everything within that definition. Mani', meaning it excludes everything which is not from that defined term. Naam. So this is why the ta'rifat are precise, because the fuqaha thought about them, and this is why they differ. Naam. And this is why you find different ta'rifat, because they know this isn't as comprehensive, or this isn't as precise because it allows certain things to enter into which is not from it. Naam. So this is a ta'rif. So for example, if I said to you, give me the ta'rif of salah, and you said prayer, it's not valid. Because Jews have prayer, Christians have prayer, singing and hymns are prayer, but that's not the intended definition of salah. But if you said to me that the definition of salah is أقوال وأفعال مخصوصة بالنية التقرب إلى الله مفتتحة بالتكبير مختتمة بالتسليم, that's a definition. That is specific statements and specific actions done for the sake of Allah, beginning with at-takbir, ending with at-taslim. This is the ta'rif of as-salah. It is comprehensive, shamil, and it is mani, and it is exclusive to that which is known as as-salah. Ala kulli hal. What is the definition of tawheed? What's the ta'rif for that?
Is similar Allah in His.
First, does anybody know in Arabic? Can somebody give me a definition in Arabic? No. Ifradullah bil ibadah. Even if you say Ifradullah bil ibadah is sufficient. Ifradullah bil ibadah. What did you say, Akhi?
Is rububiyyah, uluhiyyah as well.
No. Or if you said Ifradullah bi kulli ma yukhtassu bihi min al-rububiyyati wal-uluhiyyati wal-asma wa sifat, as we studied. And then ash-shirk, who can give me a definition of ash-shirk? Who knows the definition of shirk in Arabic? No. Who knows? What does the author say? Da'watullahi ma'allah. To invoke, worship others along with Allah. No? Or the English. Summarize the 4 principles concisely. So who can give me a summary of the first principle? And in a single sentence. What have you got written? Okay? What did you write?
I think this is wrong, but I wrote down to learn knowledge. But
No.
I
The
think
first of the
I
four
wrote
principles.
wrong notes.
Have you written it?
Yeah.
What have you written?
To know the disbelievers.
Huh?
To know the disbelievers.
No. What's the full principle? What? Huh?
This is that the pagans, they believe that there was only one creator.
No, that's it. The mushrikun at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they affirmed the rububiyyah of Allah. No. Anything else? Or?
He took the.
See, to affirm that the mushrikun at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they affirmed the rububiyyah of Allah. And then the second principle, who can summarize for me the second principle? Who's written the exam? Written?
No.
Do you need it written?
Is it that the
Written exam?
No, I wasn't even. This is my first day.
I wrote, but I got the question wrong. That specific.
What did you write?
I wrote to learn knowledge, to act upon it, to teach.
No,
and-
that's from Al-Usool Ath-Thalaatha.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
wrong note.
Because I have to give them priority. The ones who wrote the exam, I have to give them priority, then I'll come to you, inshallah. Who's written for them?
The pagans had worshipped with the intention of other deities providing an intercession.
Now, the reason why they worshipped those other deities was for Al-Qurba and Al-Shafa'a. Was for Al-Qurba and Al-Shafa'a. Now, were you going to say the same thing?
Yeah.
No. And the third principle, who knows the third? Who can summarize for me the third principle? No, somebody's written first. For them.
The pagans worshipped many forms of.
No, it wasn't only stones that they worshipped. They worshipped different types of deities, like angels and prophets, the sun, the moon, the stones, the trees, etc. as I also mentioned. And then the fourth principle, who can summarize the fourth principle?
The mushriks of these times are worse than the mushriks of the past because their shirk is far worse because they have the khawfiyya and
Because they used to commit shirk in times of severity. Often, they used to commit shirk in times of ease, but when it was times of severity, then they would turn to Allah. Whereas the mushrikun of today, they are committing shirk in times of ease and difficulty. No? Then, no. So how is the shirk of some of the people today worse than the shirk of the Quraysh, as we mentioned? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِذَا رَكِبُوا الْفُلْكَ دَعَوُا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ فَلَمَّا نَجَّاهُمْ إِلَى الْبَرِّ إِذْ هُمْ يُشْرِكُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that when they embark upon the ship and they're about to drown, دَعَوُا اللَّهَ, then they call out to Allah alone. And then when He saves them and takes them to the land, then they commit a shirk. So in times of severity, they would turn to Allah when they were desperate. In times of ease, then they would commit a shirk. As for the people today, even when they're drowning, they'll call out to the awliya. Then answer the following doubts with at least one evidence. If somebody said, my actions are not shirk because I believe Allah is an absolute creator and provider, how would you answer that? If somebody said to you, don't call my actions shirk because I believe Allah is Ar-Rabb, how would you answer that?
That the Quraysh believed that what the Prophet was sent for the fire.
No, because this is the belief of the Quraysh. And what's the evidence for this?
The hadith where it said I was commanded to fight the people.
وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَ.
is it the verse in the Quran that mentions that if you ask them who's the creator of
No.
the heavens and the earth?
No. Which the author made, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ, the verse ayat that we mentioned. Okay, if the mushrik says, my actions are not shirk because I am only invoking the awliya as a shafa'a to Allah. And I know that it is Allah the one who answers, but the awliya are means to Him. So how would you answer this doubt?
Could you use Ayatul Kursi? Or is that not specific enough?
No. Look, man.
The Mushrikeen, they used to do the same thing. They used to say that we worship them to get closer to Allah.
Ahsan, because this is the doubt of the mushrikeen. ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى ويقولون هؤلاء شفعاؤنا عند الله. Now the ayat which we studied, they say we do not worship them except that they take us close to Allah. And the other ayah, يعبدون من دون الله ما لا يضرهم ولا ينفعهم ويقولون هؤلاء شفعاؤنا عند الله. They invoke others besides Allah who cannot harm nor can they benefit, and they say هؤلاء شفعاؤنا. Those are our intercession towards Allah. So it's the same justification of the mushrikeen. If somebody said, just as you cannot approach a king or a minister directly, then similarly, you need intercession to be heard by Allah. How would you reply to that? Now, this is a common doubt. How do you reply?
From the statement, they are associating others with Allah, as in trying to make it seem like they're equal.
Now, they are comparing others to Allah. Meaning, why do you need to go through a minister to get to the king? Because the king is weak. Because the king cannot hear more than one person at one time. Because the king has limited abilities. So by saying that just you can't go to a king without going through the council, therefore you can't go to Allah except by going through a wali or a wasila, you're comparing one who is al-Khaliq al-Raziq al-Sami al-Basir to the one who is weak and incapable and has many imperfections. So this is the answer which you give. وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. There's no one who is comparable to Allah. He's the all-hearing, He's the all-knowing. So through your actions, you are being mushabbiha. You are comparing others to Allah. If a person says, I do not invoke idols, I invoke the righteous awliya, those who have a place with Allah. Meaning if a person said that don't compare my actions to the Quraysh because they used to invoke idols, but I am invoking the awliya who have a great place with Allah, then how would you reply to that person? How would you reply to that person?
Did the Quraysh do the same thing?
No, because the Quran says, who said that the Quraysh only invoked stones and idols? Amongst them were those who used to invoke angels and prophets and messengers and the sun and the moon and the trees. We covered all of this. No.
Could you also say that Islam came to rebuke the Christians for worshipping Mary and Isa?
Also, and he was a prophet. Isa was a prophet.
And you use the verse don't assign the piety to yourself and another verse to place up. And that verse be
How is the
saying
shahid?
that we're making dua to pious people, but they have no confirmation that these people are still pious.
No, but they might say it's a prophet, for example. Do you understand?
Oh, I thought they meant like
Yeah.
that for
No, like if they're invoking, for example, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Isa alayhi salam, or Jibreel alayhi salam. So there's two evidences. Now, one evidence is in general. Allah said, وَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Do not invoke anybody besides Allah. It doesn't matter if it's angel or a righteous. That's one evidence. The other evidence is that this is your misconception that the mushrikun only used to invoke idols, stones, like we studied. If somebody said, Shafa'ah is confirmed in the Qur'an, and my actions are merely seeking Shafa'ah, meaning in the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirms as Shafa'ah. And what I am doing is what Allah commanded. I am making a Shafa'ah, I am making al-wasila. So how do you reply to that? Once again, anybody else?
When you seek a shafa'ah,
Yeah.
you're in a way saying that Allah is not annoying because
No. Tell them.
Is it that we have two types of shifa? The one that's permissible, one that's impermissible. So the impermissible one is seeking it through somebody else without Allah being the objective. Whereas is it that like the permissible one is asking somebody who's righteous outwardly for them to do dua on behalf of you, whereas they wouldn't do that. They would actually have the person.
Nearly, and you're not far off. He said Shifa is confirmed in the Quran. And like you said, no, there's two types of Shifa. In some instances, Shifa is affirmed in the Quran. In some instances, Shifa is negated in the Quran. In some places, Allah subhanahu wa ma lahum min shafi'. Allah said there is no intercession for them. So there's certain types of Shifa which is negated in the Quran. The Shafa'ah which is affirmed in the Quran is that which is sought from Allah, or that which Allah permits for it to be done. Like on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will permit the Prophet ﷺ and allow him to make a shafa'ah. As for the shafa'ah which is negated, then that is seeking intercession from other than Allah, or seeking help in something which only Allah subhanahu can do. So it's not the case that every type of shifa is affirmed in the Qur'an. Some type of shifa is affirmed, some are negated with its conditions as we mentioned previously. Now, that's the end of the exam, alhamdulillah.
And you know, for that last point, can you use Ayatul Kursi as an evidence?
Naam also. Illa bi-idhnihi, without his permission. It shows that one of the conditions of shifa is that Allah is permitting Allah for that shifa to be done. Jazakumullah. I think your next lesson is about to begin. Jazakumullah khair.